All right, Chris. We're here, ready to talk about the crazy news that's been happening here with Notre Dame football, Chris. I think we were both really kind of shocked. I think our whole staff was shocked by the news yesterday. There's certainly a lot that's going on right now that's out there with Notre Dame, and we know Brian Kelly's gone. Who's he going to take with him? Are any of these assistants going to remain at Notre Dame? All those types of things are out there, and I think we'll probably just try and tackle each kind of topic one by one. If you're out there and you're watching the YouTube live, if you want to have any, or if you have any questions, you can click on the little chat section there and ask Christian and I a question, and we'll do our best to answer it. Also, if you're not a member, you please subscribe. There's a subscribe button down there. Click on that, and you'll be able to get all our videos moving forward. All right, Chris. Well, let's start with I guess the obvious thing. Are you surprised Kelly left? And why do you think he left in the end?
Not only was the Irish Sports Daily staff surprised, I think the Notre Dame football coaching staff was surprised, right? I mean, from what we've heard, the guys that were out there on the road, very few, if any of them, I haven't heard of anybody kind of new. They seem to be caught off guard from the sources we've talked to. I was very caught off guard. Obviously, the rumblings picked up a little bit more. They had some intensity to them on Monday. And the one thing we didn't think it was BS, right? We didn't think it was necessarily just a power play to get leverage. We'd heard, and I know you talked to some people down in Baton Rouge, Mike. LSU was coming after him, and that was definitely going to happen. And the only thing I didn't think he'd say yes to him, just because off the cuff it didn't seem like a great fit, right? And some of the people that we've been talking to, that we talked to yesterday, we've been talking to for months about this. And some of the guys were even making notes and talking about Walker Howard coming up to visit Notre Dame, and quick joke like, yeah, he's just coming up to see Coach Kelly to get a look at his office before he comes down to LSU. And you're like, I don't know about that. So but then that stuff picked up, and in the end, I mean, the one thing that was clear to me was Jack Swarbrick's message today at the press conference was all about trying to assure the fan base and just the college ball world that Notre Dame's in a position where it can win national championship. Now, maybe Brian Kelly disagrees with that, and that's why he left. If you're making $75 million, $100 million is a lot of money to us, but if we got $75 million in the bank, not quite as much. So was it about money or was it about opportunity? I don't know.
For me, Chris, something I don't think a lot of people have thought about, and I have a feeling Brian Kelly thought about, and that is what is going to happen now with this new transfer portal and all the stuff that's going on. We've already seen that there's a lot of kids going in the portal. I've done a lot of research. It was kind of crazy. That's what I was talking about yesterday and on one of my calls, and it was talking to somebody around the Notre Dame program and said, do you expect a lot of guys to transfer? And the answer was, yeah, they did, mainly guys who just aren't playing. And then I've come to find out that, Georgia Tech is expecting 25 guys or more to leave their program. And that's what's going to happen everywhere in college football. And I kept trying to tell people that this is going to be a problem. And I told them a long time ago that what you would see is Nick Saban going across roster to roster, trying to pick players that fit exactly what he wants to do. Everybody said I was crazy. And what's he do? He goes and steals Notre Dame's punter. Goes and steals their punter. And that's what's going to happen in college football. And I think for Kelly, he looks at the situation, and again, I don't know this for a fact, but I think he probably looks at the situation and says, it's going to be hard to compete when half your roster wants to leave because they're not playing, and we can't then bring in a whole bunch of players because they won't qualify for Notre Dame. And so we're constantly going to have to be on the transfer portal. But, the only thing that could really help us are probably grad transfers. We're not going to be able to, get the guy who, just didn't like
Weird
it
kid.
at a certain school and wants to get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because talking to Matt Freeman, who's obviously really well dialed into the program with us at Irish Sports Daily, he's heard a lot of rumblings about even freshmen at Notre Dame who are actually playing, who are thinking about transferring. I mean, what is this? What is going on? And this is what I think. If I'm Brian Kelly, I start to wonder: does this make sense? To continue to try and do this at Notre Dame when I'm going to have these obstacles. And I have a feeling that had as much to do with it as anything. It's just the changing landscape of college football. And can Notre Dame compete? But it's kind of also like, to me, like the Lincoln Riley thing, right? I think Kelly just tuck-tailed and ran when things got hard. I'm going to just go find the easier solution. Which is crazy because, you're sitting there and you're telling people to come to Notre Dame and make the hard choice, and then when push comes to shove, you take the easy road out. You know what I mean? It's just it's kind of an interesting thing, and I don't think you and I are surprised by this in that Brian Kelly would do it. You know what I mean? Just knowing his personality, and I don't think any of us have ever really felt like he's loved the job here until recently. But it is kind of surprising that how it happened and when it happened. And sometimes, Christian, they say that it's all about timing, and it's all about, sometimes you just got to get lucky. Maybe Notre Dame just got lucky. I mean, there's a really good opportunity or a good case to be made that maybe they just got lucky and we just don't know it yet. Your thoughts?
I was talking to a couple guys last night, and they kind of hinted about that, and we were talking about names and potential names, and one guy said, would you, if this was a wash and whatever, would you have the opportunity? Would you trade Brian Kelly for one of the younger guys who's not going to cost you as much money? Maybe you have a chance to spend some more on salary. Would you trade a 60-year-old Brian Kelly for a young 40-year-old Marcus Freeman or, Luke Fickell? All things being equal except for the salaries and the age. Maybe you would, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you would. And, I know one of your big things, Mike, and you wrote about in your piece today, was needing a head coach that loves to recruit. Well, Marcus Freeman loves to recruit. So if you get a young head coach, you're not paying him, ungodly amounts of money, able to use that money maybe to build up that staff even better. He likes to recruit. And one thing is, everything starts from the top down, right? That's how Urban Meyer was able to do all this stuff.
Absolutely.
So if your head coach is loving to recruit and he's out there busting his ass, well, he's going to hire guys like that too. And that's going to trickle all the way down. So could Notre Dame just got really, really lucky? Will you look back on this in 4 or 5 years and say, wow, how about that? That was quite a break. Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility.
Sometimes you just get lucky, and there's a chance that this may be the situation. I don't think either one of us, and I don't want to speak for you, but I never thought Brian Kelly would win a national championship. I never did, because I just know he wasn't going to work hard enough in recruiting, and it wasn't changing. He may have picked up the phone a few more times, but a lot of these guys, they've never really had, he just doesn't call the kids like Saban does or Dabo or a lot of these coaches do. And it's going to be, I'm glad that that's not the problem anymore. But let's just say if it is Marcus Freeman, I mean, you're going to have some growing pains. Things aren't just going to be an easy transition, that's for sure. He's going to make, if it is him at some point, he's going to make a lot of mistakes. But I think Luke Fickell would make some mistakes, and pretty much anybody else you hire here. But the one thing I will say is he has been here and he understands it. If say Fickell comes, I would guess that he'd probably bring Mike Denbrock with him, if for no other reason than he understands and has been to Notre Dame, and he can help him kind of get through what all this means. And that's no disrespect. I mean, he'd bring Mike Denbrock because he thinks he's a really good coach and a good offensive coordinator. But I think just having that extra thing would certainly be something that he would find valuable, and with Marcus Freeman, he already has that too. He understands what the situation is at Notre Dame, and where a Matt Rule or somebody else, Matt Campbell, probably doesn't understand that as well, and so they'd have a learning curve as well. But it just very well could be Notre Dame just lucked into the best thing that ever happened to him.
Yeah, well, I mean, there'd be, I think it's one for the other, right? Marcus Freeman, in terms of he understands Notre Dame, but he's never been a head coach, and to be a first-time head coach at Notre Dame, that's where the challenges would come in. Where guys like Fickell and Campbell and Rule and those guys would at least have an idea of, what it's like to be the top of the program. But like you said, they'd all make mistakes and get to learn things too. I remember when Kelly did, obviously on the field, people know that. But I mean, I even remember just in he didn't grasp the size of the program to the point where, you remember when he first got hired, Mike, they would he wanted to do press conferences on the field afterwards.
Yeah.
We would all have to huddle around him and throw our reporters out there. Like, this is not high school football.
Yeah. That's not how you do it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's windy out there. Nobody can hear anything.
Yeah, exactly.
That just, to me, showed me this is a bigger step up than he realized. And we all had to tell people, the media relations people, listen, we can't do that. We're not going to be able to do our jobs. We're not doing it this way. And, they didn't want to offend him so much. But eventually, they had to get across to him, like, listen, man, we're not going to – this is Notre Dame. We can't be out there on the field jockeying for position like you're some, high school head coach with a whistle around his neck.
Yeah.
So even those other guys that are, established head coaches, like you said, they'll have to get used to and learn and understand what it means to be at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Hang on, I got to send a text here.
You get everybody all excited, Mike. Who's Mike texting?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, exactly. It's nothing that anybody should get too excited about. That's for sure. Ah, dang it. I'm just not good at texting. All right. So we got a bunch of questions here from ISD customers, and let's get to some of them real quick. Joey says, "Hey, would you be surprised if they hired out instead of promoting within?" I wouldn't be surprised at that at all. I think, I think in my, I could be completely wrong, but I would think that, Luke Fickell and Matt Campbell are probably two guys that would certainly be on a short list if they were going to go that route. And, I would think that they would probably go after them pretty quickly if that's the case, and try and figure out what their level of interest is. But at the end of the day, we talked about this on the board. It's tough, Chris, because we just saw Devin Moore decommit, and there's probably not many behind that will get. If you get Luke Fickell, is Devin Moore coming back in fold? I don't know. If you get Matt Campbell, is he coming in fold? I don't know. If you get Marcus Freeman, is he coming in fold? Probably a lot better chance of that if he's going to be that guy. So anything you want to add, Chris?
No, I would just say, give me, if you said, what are the odds, who do they take? I'd put, it's hard to put Freeman versus Fickell. It seems like they go back and forth a little bit in my mind in terms of who's more likely, but I think it's one of those two guys. Like, I'll take those. If you gave me odds, I would take those two guys against the field.
Yeah.
So maybe it's slightly more likely right now that Freeman gets it than Fickell. I probably thought differently this morning, but I think there's definitely a chance they hire Fickell, right? So that'd be outside the program.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Here we go. Mike, if I told you how I feel about Brian Kelly right now, I'd be banned immediately by YouTube. Well, I suppose I could understand why people would be upset. It is what it is. I got more calls. Let's see. And this is kind of what we were just talking about. Do you believe there's a realistic path of turning this into a positive? Oh, I absolutely think so. We were just talking about it. I think if you can find the right guy and he's somebody who's a bulldog on the recruiting trail, you could turn this into a positive almost immediately. I think there are a number of guys that I think, maybe if Marcus Freeman was the guy, maybe all of a sudden they get interested in Notre Dame again. We know about Kamari Rogers, being a guy that they were pursuing. Boy, if he's head coach now, I got to believe he's going to listen. What do you think there, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ramps it up a little bit more. I mean, he already has a lot of juice. He had juice before he even coached a game at Notre Dame. He went to living rooms. Now he goes in there talking about, what he accomplished the second half of the season from a defensive perspective, and now they've promoted him to head coach. I mean, that guy would have a tremendous amount of swagger walking into the living room. Both, I think he'd come across well for offensive players as well too. So I don't think it's just limited to guys that he would coach. But yeah, like you said, in terms of turning into a positive, I think there's a very good chance. I mean, look at, every other year people want Kelly gone anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to your point, Mike, if you're one of those people who doesn't believe that Brian Kelly was going to get over the hump, well, you gotta move on. That's kind of the way I look at, sports is, if you're in a position where you're not going to win the championship, you need to change something in order to win it rather than continue to do it. And, believe what Swarbrick said or not, when he basically was trying to say that, there's not a huge gap between Notre Dame and the rest of the country right now. In the rest of the country, we're talking Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, those schools. Whether you believe that or not, his overall message in terms of the program being in such a different position now than it was 12 years ago when he hired Kelly, there's no doubt about that. I mean, this is a program that went to 2 college playoff games the last 3 years, on the verge potentially of another one. They don't have nearly as far away to go as they did before. So, yeah, this could be the kind of change that potentially gets them over the hump.
Yeah, I also don't think you can read too much into the Jack Swarbrick, press conference as far as what he said and that type of thing. I do think that he'd like to take his time and do this, but he may not have a choice either. But one thing that stood out to me in his comments was he was talking about, well, he wasn't going to name an interim head coach. And I think a lot of people were like, well, why would you do that? But I think there's a lot of good reason not to do it. One, you don't want to name an interim head coach that is going to then turn around and go to LSU with Brian Kelly shortly thereafter. That's not going to look good. I think the thing that really stood out to me too was he was asked about, if you did name an interim head coach, would that person then be a candidate for the head coaching job? And he said no. And if you kind of put those pieces together, Chris, what does that tell you? Well, the thing it tells me is the only person he would probably name interim head coach would be Marcus Freeman. And you wouldn't name Marcus Freeman interim head coach if you were going to name him head coach anyway. Do you follow what I'm saying? Why would you name him interim if he's going to be the head coach anyway? And if you have to name an interim head coach, as he said he may do later, well, that probably means because Marcus Freeman isn't going to be there. He's probably going to be at LSU or some other spot. And so, the more I kind of thought about those comments, I started putting that together, and I'm like, well, you know what? That actually makes a lot of sense. So maybe that's what he was saying.
Another thing, and I was thinking about it initially, was thinking you didn't want to have a battle between, say, Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman, with one of them thinking, oh, this guy's the interim, so he's got the leg up, and this is an audition. But to your point, Mike, if you were going to think about hiring someone else, say a Luke Fickell, well, and you wanted to retain Marcus Freeman, you already made your decision, you're going to go after Fickell, and you wanted to retain Marcus Freeman, I would probably name him interim head coach, right? Say, hey, we're going to give you a shot. This is an open audition. You've got a chance, blah, blah, blah. And I think that would we're going to add this to your resume. I think that would be your best approach if you wanted to retain Marcus Freeman, which if they're going to hire Luke Fickell, you would obviously want to retain Marcus Freeman. So, I think you think you could be on something there, Mike.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I just thought it was I just started thinking about it and that makes a lot of sense. Here is a very, very interesting question, Christian. Well, wait a minute. That was not the interesting question I was thinking of. Here it is. This is the one by Derek. Question, do you all think that Diggs will follow Kelly back home to Louisiana? That's an interesting question because if Lance Taylor follows Brian Kelly to LSU, which I'm sure Brian Kelly's going to want to take Lance Taylor. He's a good coach. Notre Dame's backs have done really well under him. He's recruited well. He's evaluated well. Um, and, if Logan Diggs thinks that I'm not going to get as many carries as I want, maybe that's the case. And again, this is where I'm trying to tell people that this transfer portal stuff is going to be a lot harder than people think. It's going to make it difficult for Notre Dame to succeed because all these people like Logan Diggs, if he doesn't feel like he's getting the carries he wants, he can go back to LSU and they'll have a scholarship for him. He's certainly proved that he can be a great player already. So he's going to have a lot of options. And how's Notre Dame replace him other than they have to recruit somebody because they can't get somebody in the transfer portal because, again, it's hard for Notre Dame to get kids in as a transfer because of the curriculum and the way it's put together. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, it's not always about the kid who's not getting carries, right? If I'm Logan Diggs, I'm pretty happy with my role at Notre Dame this year. But now you my head coach and my running backs coach, I like the way they're developing me. I like the progress. They're gone, and they want me to come back home to a place where I was seriously considering all the way to the end last time.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of hard, it's challenging a bit from those guys, Kelly and Taylor, to sell him on, all the things they sold him, unsell him on the stuff, the reason why they told him to go to Notre Dame, but, it's not impossible, right? And, there's obviously some draw or attraction playing for the home state school, or else he wouldn't have been considering them so late in the process. And
sure.
Yeah. So I don't think it's always going to be the kid who's unhappy if a coach leaving. Sometimes it can be the kid who's happy.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. It really will be to see how that one all unfolds. Got another question here. Mike, how much info are you getting that is real versus BS? To be honest, I'm not getting a lot of information, and I didn't expect to get a lot of information. I have gotten a few things recently, and I don't think any of the stuff I've gotten recently is BS because of where it came from. So, we'll see. I don't think this coaching search is going to go as long as some people think, but maybe it will. I don't know. I don't know. We're just going to have to see what happens here. I think if they are going to name somebody like Freeman, it'll happen very soon. If they're going to name somebody like Fickell, it'll probably be something where we have to wait a bit. Will it be till the end of the playoff or they get eliminated? Maybe. And that's a question, Chris. If you're Swarbrick and you go to Fickell and he says, you know what, I'll take the job, but I can't do it till after. Do you take that guy? Do you still take him, or do you think you have to move sooner?
Yeah, real quick. I don't want to have like the space like we had last night with Mick Asoff and those guys. We were just speculating on Logan Diggs and Taylor potentially.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
People in there are getting confused.
Yeah,
and that was one of the things that I picked up on and made me start to think maybe Swarbrick is leaning towards Fickell, right? So he really downplayed the importance of time, right? So you're thinking, okay, play it out. Maybe either or you anticipate that it's going to be hard to pull Luke Fickell away from a chance to win a national championship. And, if that's the case and you can't even name him head coach until after they're eliminated, you better calm those waters and do everything you can to calm the waters. You can't go out there and say, we're going to have a head coach in a week and the time's going to be important and blah, blah, blah. If you know that you're not going to have a head coach until January 1 at the earliest, do you let him? I guess it depends on how sold you are on Luke Fickell being the guy.
Yeah.
If Luke Fickell's your guy, you've had your eye on him, you've had him circled. This is your opportunity. You talked about timing. Timing is going to be right. It might not be perfect for 2 or 3 weeks, but overall timing is good here. This is your chance to get the guy that you had, your number one guy. I think it could be worth it. Now, is there a way you can hire him and allow him to coach the game? I don't know, man. I don't know. To me, it's about the players. People were talking about Brian Kelly potentially coaching Notre Dame. I even talked to parents last night, about that. Like, the players going to want to play for that guy? All the players are going to want to play for that guy in a championship setting like that? No.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure you can have both. It might be Fickell, we were hiring you, we're pulling you away. You don't have a chance to coach in the playoff, which would be real difficult for him. Or it's keep it quiet, keep it under your hat until January 1 or maybe even January 12th. So that's I guess once you go by December 15th, though, you're already. If it goes by December 15th, it's going to have to be. It's going to be an outside hire, obviously, right, Mike?
Oh yeah,
Even
I
if
would
it goes
think.
by a week, right?
Yeah, I think if it even gets past this weekend,
Exactly.
because look, Marcus Freeman's phone is ringing off the hook right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, is he going to go to LSU or is he going to, stay at Notre Dame? There's a lot of people that are probably calling this guy right now. Whether that be as a head coaching opportunity at a place like, say, Duke or Virginia Tech or something like that, or is it a situation where, hey, look, I know LSU says, well, they're going to pay you the most ever, but we'll pay you just as much, to be a defensive coordinator here. Maybe Lincoln Riley, or obviously Riley's taking his guy, but there will be opportunities for him as a defensive coordinator as well. So, but I think Kelly, if he's smart, if I'm Brian Kelly, I put some pressure on Marcus Freeman and say, look, we love you, we want you, but I can't wait forever. So you got to make a decision here soon because I got to fill out my staff. I got to know. I got to be able to tell these kids when I'm recruiting them who the defensive coordinator is going to be. So he's going to put a lot of pressure on Marcus Freeman to make a decision fairly soon. And I'm certain that Swarbrick will know that if he's under consideration as a head coach. And so these are all things that are going to come into play with this.
Do you think that
Go ahead.
LSU would need? Do you think LSU would need to have some sort of head coach in waiting role for Marcus Freeman? Because the way I look at it is, right. So you just turned down LSU to go to Notre Dame last year with Kelly, who you don't really have a relationship with.
Yeah.
Are you going to turn down? Are you going to now go to LSU with Kelly over Luke Fickell, who's your close friend? Also, but the ultimate thing you got to remember, it doesn't, to me, they're going to make him the highest paid defensive coordinator. Well, that guy's not planning on being a defensive coordinator for very long.
Yeah.
So you're the highest paid defensive coordinator for 1 year to get a head coaching job. Does it really matter all that much in the grand scheme of things? If I'm Swarbrick and I want Fickell, I make Marcus Freeman tell Fickell no. Mm-hmm. You tell Fickell, but maybe you can't. I guess you could, but yeah, that's kind of the way I would look at it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I just don't see Marcus Freeman taking the gig unless it's an opportunity that, like something doesn't pop up for him as a head coaching job. I don't think he'll stick around and wait for what Notre Dame does either, because you just don't know. But he didn't take the job. It wasn't money that was the reason he didn't take the job. It was he just didn't want to move his family down there, and we know he's an aspiring head coach. And so do you want to move your family one more time, and you may have to move them the very next year on top of that, Mm-hmm. So that's what would have to happen, and we'll just have to see. Let me ask you this question. If it isn't Marcus Freeman, how many of these recruits do you think Notre Dame loses? That's a good question. And I think a lot of Irish fans want us to answer this, and I'm going to pull up the list here. And so we're just going to go down them, all right?
Okay, let's go. Right. First of all, I would knock out almost all, if not all, of the 23 defensive guys.
Yeah, I think so. All the 2023 guys, I think, would be gone.
And that, not to say they wouldn't come back eventually.
Sure.
But those guys have so much time. They're all top-level guys who are all, bought into Marcus Freeman. So just, in general, I would knock all those guys out right away.
All right. Joshua Burnham. I think he'd stay. I think he'd stay.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. They've all, just to know, they've all expressed public interest in hoping Marcus Freeman gets a job. So not saying he doesn't care about Freeman, but I think he would stay.
Yeah. Jalen Sneed.
The thing you have to think about is where else would they go?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of places that would take Jalen Sneed.
What I mean? No, but I mean, what was he really close to anywhere else at the time?
Well, the other thing is he doesn't need to decide by the 15th. Nobody does. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yep.
I mean, everybody's going to take Jalen Sneed, whether it's December 15th, December 16th, January 5th. They'll take him whenever. So I think that's a situation. we Aiden Gobera, I think he'd stick regardless.
Yep,
Don't you?
I do. I
Yeah,
think he would stick.
I think he would. We know Devin Moore won't.
He's already decommitted.
Yeah, he's decommitted. Junior Tui Halamaka, I don't think he comes. I don't
Yeah,
think.
he might not have came if nothing happened yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. Nolan Ziegler, I think he
He's
wants to
sticking.
come. I think he stays in the end, but we'll see. Ben
I think he
Morrison,
sticks. Ben Morrison is an interesting guy who I do not know very well. My guess is he would stick. He seems like an extremely thoughtful
yeah,
young man, like more mature and thoughtful than myself. He seems like the kind of person, personality wise, who would stick.
Jaden Mickey.
I think he sticks, but
It'll be a battle.
yeah, and I know they're really, really distraught in the immediate aftermath. The
Yep,
family.
yep. Jaden Bellamy.
I think he sticks, but I think that wouldn't be a lock.
Yeah,
I think he would stick, but I don't know that it would be like, oh, this kid's not even going to look around.
yep. Donovan Heinisch, I think he'd stick. Well, yeah.
I think Mike Frank
Elston,
could be the defensive coordinator, and he might go.
yeah, that it may be. Yeah. Well, that'd be an upgrade, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
What do you mean? Yeah, you guess so.
You're
Okay.
right. Elston could play the role there.
Yeah.
Elston's future could be the indicator there.
How would you like to be Bryce McPherson today?
Bryce was the first commit to text me back.
Was
He's
he?
sticking. He says that. I said, "Did this change anything for you?" He said, "Nah."
Nah. Well, I don't think. But will they want him? I'm sure they will, of course. But I mean,
They need a
when you look
punter.
at
What are they going to do?
offensive guys are even interesting. Like I talked to Scott Raritan last night for quite a while. Everybody knows I'm really friendly with Scott, and I think Eli wants to stick. Just based off everything I've heard. But I think it just depends on who they hire as an offensive coordinator. But Scott assured me that they're not the type of people that are going to make a rash decision. And I think Eli would like to go to Notre Dame because he likes the players and he likes the culture and that type of thing. But I do think a lot of it's going to depend on who they hire as an offensive coordinator. So
Eli was interesting because he was the only recruit that they could get to chat in that Mick Asoff
yeah,
Twitter space last night, which was really, really an interesting deal for anyone that was in there. And Eli spoke up and they kept pointing questions to him. They tried to get him to bring some other commits on. There were some other commits in there listening, but nobody else felt comfortable talking. And he kind of said that he was going to stick and he committed to Notre Dame for Notre Dame. But like you said, Mike, he obviously was interested in who gets hired next. But he reiterated multiple times. And like I said, this is an offensive guy that he's flat out said, if Freeman's hired, everyone will stick.
mm-hmm.
And this is the guy who's in that commit group chat.
Yeah.
So, that even goes to show you, even the offensive guys prefer Freeman.
Yeah, man, that'll be interesting because there's some really good players like J.D. Price. I'd hate to lose J.D. Price, but you got to know that if you're Lance Taylor and Lance Taylor goes down to LSU, he's going hard after J.D. Price. He absolutely will. The guy's a really good player. I don't think any of us feels like no matter who they hired, C.J. Williams is coming. Maybe he will. I don't know, but things are crazy there. And then the rest of the offensive players, I just don't know. I just don't know how they would feel about it. So here's the next question, and somebody asked this question, and I think this is a good one right here. Mike, do you think if it is Freeman, do you think he would keep the existing staff mostly intact? I don't think there's any chance of that. And I think there'd be even less chance that any of the offensive staff ends up staying. I can't imagine any of the offensive guys staying. Could you?
Yeah.
Well, you're laughing.
Yeah.
You're laughing because I know why you're laughing.
I don't want to say any of them. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you could get Lance Taylor to stay or somebody like that. I don't know. But yeah, I would count on a lot of new faces over on the other side of the ball. And you know what? That's an interesting thing when you look at Kelly, what Kelly's going to bring.
Mm-hmm.
Does Kelly bring players? How many staff members from both sides of the ball can he bring?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Kelly's going to want to try and bring some guys for sure.
Well, he's already offered Reese and
and
Freeman.
Marcus, and my guess is, if I had to guess, I think he'll go after Lance, right?
Absolutely.
I think he'll go after probably McNulty, because I think McNulty's a very good tight end coach. The other two, and Dell and Jeff Quinn, I think that's more up in the air. And I don't think that Kelly has much of a chance, especially if, maybe he has a chance if Freeman takes if Freeman takes the defensive coordinator position. I think a lot of those guys would probably go. But if he stays at Notre Dame or goes elsewhere, how many of those guys follow Kelly? I don't know the answer to that. I just don't know. So we'll have to see. Here's a question for you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think is the one guy sitting there today, scratching his head, saying, why the hell didn't I just stick around for one more year? Who do you think that guy is?
At Notre Dame?
Yeah. It's obvious if you think about it.
Who are you thinking?
Clark Lee.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. He'd have a really good shot at this job. And now he's down in hell over there at Vanderbilt. So I just thought that was an interesting thing I hadn't really thought about. But all right, here we go. Got another question.
I'm looking at this now, Mike. I saw this in the chat, and the Advocate in Baton Rouge, they're reporting that Freeman is expected to join Kelly's staff.
Yeah, well, they can expect all they want. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I'm just saying that too.
Yeah. Yeah, they can expect all they want, but, we'll have to see whether that actually materializes.
Yeah, and I don't see it in the story. It's just in the tweet,
Yeah.
So.
All right, so Tom wants to know, do you think this negatively affects the college football playoff chances, assuming teams need to lose or assuming the teams we need to lose happens? I don't know, because if I'm the college playoff committee, I'm like, does Notre Dame belong if their head coach is gone? Will they still be the same team? That's a good question. I don't know. What do you think?
I tweeted it out and posted on the board. There is a criteria in the principles of selecting that, if a coach is gone and that materially changes the way you view that team, they can factor that in. Yeah. Now, I think that gets factored in, when we're judging Notre Dame versus Oklahoma State, right? Mm-hmm. And that's an easy way for them to say, yeah, it was close, but, we just thought whatever. If Oklahoma State loses and Georgia loses, I don't think they're putting a 2-loss team ahead of 1-loss Notre Dame regardless. And you know what? In the end, a lot of this stuff's about money. Notre Dame's always going to drive dollars, but they're going to drive a lot of dollars with the opportunity to say they have an interim head coach and this guy, whoever it is, they don't know. That storyline in itself, in addition to the fact that it's a 1-loss Notre Dame, you're going to put a 2-loss team over them. That would be really, really bad. So I think it's an easy out for the committee if it's Oklahoma State with 1 loss versus Notre Dame with 1 loss. But if Oklahoma State loses and Alabama loses, then I think Notre Dame's still in.
Yeah, that will be an interesting thing to see how that unfolds. Okay. Sorry, I'm just getting a lot of different questions here, and it's hard to read them all. Here's another question. What is a realistic timeline or time frame for a coaching search? Well, I think we kind of covered it. I think if it is Marcus Freeman, we'll have that answer probably by this weekend, I would guess. If it's Fickell, it could be, who knows? If it's Matt Campbell, my guess is that would happen pretty quickly too. Maybe not by this weekend, but I have a feeling they maybe by early next week, that would be a situation. If it's a guy like Matt Rule who's in the NFL, he's not going to leave the NFL for any time early, I wouldn't think. I don't know too many coaches in the NFL who've left like in the middle of the season. So
Saban and what's his name?
Yeah,
guy from Louisville.
Oh yeah, did they leave during the season though? Did they?
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was during the season, but yeah, I guess so. There's a precedent for it, so who knows? I guess we'll see. But so I think that there's a lot of different I guess, scenarios for it to unfold. I would think that there's probably a good chance we'll know something by this weekend or the beginning of next week if it's those two. And if we have to go longer, I got to believe it's probably Fickell that they're trying to get. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would think if it's Marcus Freeman, we'll know by Friday. If it's Matt Campbell, we'll know by early next week. And if we do not know by early next week, it's Fickell. But the thing is, and I don't know how you can keep this under wraps. I mean, if you're Luke Fickell and you don't agree to anything in writing or anything until after till January 1, I mean, phew, you can really, really hold him over the barrel there.
Oh yeah.
So, and I don't know how you sign something or agree to something without it leaking out. So that's where the real, kind of gets, interesting. But yeah, Freeman we should know. I would want to know by Friday, and then Matt Campbell or somebody else like that shortly after, and then Luke Fickell would be TBD.
Yeah, no doubt. Got another question. Are there any tea leaves that suggest it may be Freeman or someone else? Again, I think it's too early to say. I do think that Marcus Freeman will be considered, though. I really do believe that. Will he get the job? I don't know, but I do think that he will be strongly considered. I have no idea whether he'll get the job or not. Hang on. I'm with you guys. As the saying goes, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. Hope it's Freeman, and he surrounds himself with a great staff. My question is, does the Notre Dame administration feel the same? I don't know. What do you think the question? What do you think he's asking there?
Do they value recruiting as much as everybody, all of us? And like you said, Mike, you don't want to read too much into Swarbrick's press conference, but it seemed to feel like he thought it was important, but he stressed the development, and that's what he wanted. He said he liked where Notre Dame's recruiting is at. I think we all would like to jump through and make another extreme leap forward so you could actually compete. And when you're talking about Jimmys and Joes at this level, I mean, you're talking about what Kirby Smart's talking about, right? Like when they played Florida and afterwards, he's like, listen, I got the best players. That's why we have the best defense. It's very simple. So does Swarbrick understand that? Does he believe that? Or does he think the recruiting is okay right now where they are? I don't know.
Well, I have a feeling Kelly sold him a bill of goods that, top 5 is all we should really expect. And I think that's complete BS. I absolutely think it's BS. And we've seen how one coach working hard, how much of a difference it makes. Imagine if your head coach made everybody work that hard and you as a head coach work that hard. And, I've said this before on the show, on Power Hour. I've said it on the site. The reason Urban Meyer was so successful is because of recruiting. He did a great job of recruiting. And the way he set up his recruiting is they would have a board, their board, and the person who is in charge of that player has to update the board every day on who they talked to, what the conversation was about, and, kind of where things are trending. So every day there would be like updates on who they spoke to and where things are. And then Urban Meyer himself would then call that guy and say, oh, yeah. So, heard you talk to Coach X. Yeah, how'd that conversation go? Yeah, what'd you talk about? And that's how he would follow up and make sure that his staff was doing the job. But that meant Urban Meyer had to pick up the phone and call. And that never happened at Notre Dame. And I think if you want to get to where you want to be, you need somebody that's going to do that. Because if you get somebody who's going to do that, you're going to have a really good chance of being successful.
I mean, you just said, like, Kelly convinced Swarbrick that top 5 is the best we can do and, say that's what Notre Dame's been. No, it's not the best they can do because just what you just said. So whatever Notre Dame's doing now, add a head coach that is willing to do the next. And you can say what you want. I mean, the stories have come out. It was Tyson Ford story about that. You look at Amarion Walker right now. He talks to Harbaugh every day.
Yeah.
Those stories are true. Those are true stories.
Absolutely. They are. Yeah.
So if you're already recruiting a top 5 class and then you do that, well, you're going to have a better class and it's going to be easier to recruit. Now, the challenge with that is having a staff and getting a staff that's going to buy into that. A lot of those, Urban Meyer staff members will tell you how hard it is and how much it grains on them. It's really, really tough. And he drives them so hard. That's the success. You see anything about Saban? He's driving that hard. That's why there's success. So you're going to need to surround yourself with the right staff that can handle that for the long run. And in the end, I think that it almost self-selects. You're going to end up the guys that can't take it will bail, and the guys that can will sit there and they'll thrive and they'll succeed. So that part of getting the right staff to follow up the way you demand could be challenging, but it definitely wherever Notre Dame's recruiting now, they can go bet. They can do better.
Yeah. Here's a question. Any chance ND is able to hold on to Elston and Bayless? I mean, I suppose it's certainly possible, but if I'm Mike Elston and I'm Bayless, I got to find a job. I got to feed my family. I don't think Mike Elston's wife works that I know of. I don't believe so. He's got a fairly large family, and I think she just takes care of the kids. So he's going to have to provide somehow. And so I would guess that he's probably trying to find a gig right now, whether it be, will Brian Kelly take him? I'm sure Kelly will try and take Bayless for sure, I would guess. I think he's been very thrilled with the results there, and rightfully so. So I would guess that they would probably try, but does Bayless want to leave? When he came here, he basically said this is the epitome of where he wants to be. This is everywhere you want to be, and that hasn't changed just because Brian Kelly left. And so I'm sure Jack Swarbrick's had a conversation with him and said, hey, we'd like to have you stick around. At least keep an open mind, and we'll see what happens with the new hire. That type of thing. So, but I think you'd have a hard chance trying to find somebody better than Bayless. I'm sure there are guys out there who could do a good job, but, better than Bayless, I don't know. And I think there's something to be said when a guy already has a good established relationship with the players you have on the roster, right? He already knows those players. And so that's a good thing to have if you're a head coach coming into something, to know that, here's a guy that can tell us everything we need to know about every player on the roster. That's invaluable. And so, I got to believe that whoever the head coach is, if Bayless isn't already signed at LSU, I got to believe that guy's going to be trying to talk to Bayless and figure out, whether he can keep him. So, but again, I think it just depends on how quick. Go ahead, Chris.
Like I said, that Spaces last night with Mick Asoff was really interesting. They had, Ian Book was in there, Nick Wisher was in there, Cole Kmet was in there talking. Julian Love popped on. All those guys said the most important person for Notre Dame to hire is Matt Bayless.
Mm-hmm.
Said back the Brinks truck up for him. They talked like, we always try to reiterate, and these guys spend most of their times with the strength staff.
They do.
There's a limit on how much time they can spend with coaches, and that limit means that the coaches need to maximize that time. They need to be installing stuff and, talking game plan, your personal, relationships and the long term throughout the years with that strength staff. And those guys couldn't say enough about him. And Cole Kmet was like, he wasn't even entertaining the idea that Bayless would leave. He's like, this guy's got deep dish pizzas in the freezer in the Goog. He's Midwestern Chicago through and through.
Yeah.
So they were all saying that hopefully the importance of him staying and thinking they had a really good chance of keeping him.
Yeah, and I hope they do, because he's good. He's really good, and he's somebody that you're going to want to keep if you can. This is a good question. Hey, Mike Christian, does Marcus Freeman have the connections in the coaching fraternity to hire a quality staff of assistant coaches? Good question. He hasn't been around long. He hasn't coached a lot. But I think, as a former player, he probably knows a lot of people. And he's got a lot of people he can lean on too. I'm sure he's probably still got a relationship with Urban Meyer, and he's probably still got a relationship with Luke Fickell and Tressel, so there's probably some people there that he could call on to help him with that. But it is a lot of, and that's a good question, because, Chris, this is very much a good old boys network when it comes to coaches. They want to know who they're getting, and they are really reluctant to hire somebody that is outside the group, because it could spoil the chemistry. And so that, I think, would be a very big question. And if I'm Jack Swarbrick and I'm interviewing Marcus Freeman, that's the first question I come up with is, okay, I think you've shown you can recruit. You've shown that, you can run a defense. What are you going to do about offense? What kind of offense are you going to run? Who are you going to hire? How do we know we can even get that person? All those questions will be something I'm sure, rapid fire coming at him. And, he's got to have some good answers. But again, I think that if you've seen the kind of organized effort that we've seen since this, I'm pretty sure that Freeman has a pretty good idea what's coming, and has planned and prepared for it.
I'm sure he's probably daydreamed about answering those exact questions to Jack Swarbrick one day. And you're right, he's young, but he does have those relationships with some key people. The other thing is he's a personable guy, right? So when they're at the coaches convention, I'm sure he's got a long list of boys and friends and people and mentors that he's become close to, that he's going to be able to call on for either advice or for hiring. Now, I'm not saying he's going to just hire a staff of all his boys, but he seems like the kind of guy who has relationships that extend beyond having worked with somebody.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Got this question. If they believe Freeman was the best guy, they would name him as coach today. Well, I don't think so. I mean, first of all, I don't know how you could know he's the best guy at this point. I think you have to interview the guy. I mean, you don't have any idea, like we just talked about. You don't have any idea who he would want to hire as an offensive coordinator. You wouldn't know what offense he'd want to run. You wouldn't know what assistant coaches he would want to hire. You'd want to investigate those assistant coaches. I know for a fact there were a couple coaches that Kelly wanted to bring from Cincinnati that they weren't allowed to bring because of some skeletons in the closet, that type of stuff. So all these things you'd have to find out before you'd say, okay, well, he's your guy. So I don't think naming him today, it's certainly a possibility. But I think it would be a situation where they would want to find out more. And you would have to know more. I don't think you, plus, obviously they've already done the background check, so we don't have to wait for that as far as, things that would hold stuff up. But, so again, I think that is something that they would have to research before they could really say, okay, well, he's the guy for sure. So, and, I don't know. I would probably want to at least interview a couple people, wouldn't you, Chris? Just to make sure that I think that if I think it's Marcus Freeman, I'd still want to talk to a couple people just to see, just to make sure. And make sure I felt good about it,
Yeah, it's what you always want to do, I guess. But at the same time, in terms of timing, right? So we talked about how important it is. I mean, if you're not getting an interview with Luke Fickell until a certain time, if that's next week or something like that, and I'm pretty sure Marcus Freeman's my guy, maybe I kind of do some just kind of token interviews with guys like Matt Campbell or somebody like that. But if Marcus Freeman's my guy and I just need to check some boxes to make sure, in that case, in the interest of time, I am moving quick.
Yeah.
Checking in with some other guys. But if other guys are kind of dragging their feet and saying, "Oh, I'll get to you when I get to you," I'm going with my guy.
Yeah, listen to me. I hired you without interviewing anybody else.
Yeah, it's a home run hire.
But boy, that's what it was. I just knew immediately it was a home run, so I didn't need to interview anybody else.
And I've outlasted Kelly.
You have. You absolutely have. You'll probably outlast me is what's going to happen. That's all right. I'm sure there are a lot of people who would rather have you in charge too. So, oh man, yeah. Oh, interesting. Charlie Wooding says Lance Taylor isn't going to LSU. They've already said they're keeping Kevin Falk. That doesn't surprise me.
Need some guys down there with some LSU ties.
I would love to keep him at Notre Dame. I think he's a good coach. I hope I hope he gets a job at Notre Dame. I would keep him. I absolutely would if he could. So it's hard. And again, I know you guys are all kind of up on this, but we're not able to follow everything else that is happening because we're too busy doing all of this. So that there's some stuff you guys have probably heard that even Chris and I haven't heard. Well, Chris has probably heard most of it because you got all the Twitter and stuff. I can't. Twitter's not for me, man.
Some of it's happening fast. So, I wanted to look into that Freeman thing. Like I said, I see the people in the chat talking about it. I agree with the guys that are saying that's kind of just a recycled story. And the tweet makes it sound like he's coming, but the story itself doesn't say that. It just says that, Kelly's going to come after him. So maybe there's something more. They haven't just finished reporting it and wanted to get the tweet out there. But we'll see. And I wouldn't. Someone asked earlier, Mike, how much of the stuff are you getting that's BS and how much of it's legit? And when Mike says that he trusts the stuff he's getting, it's legit, I would trust that over what you're seeing, just from, national people that are just throwing things out there that aren't definitive. If it's someone saying that they're going to wait for Fickell, maybe they do, but, I don't know that anyone's going to be breaking that story and have it stone cold locked down at this point.
Yeah, and again, I'm not somebody who's ever going to lie to you. If I don't know something, I just don't know it, and I've always had that policy because, I remember being just a fan and having all these media people go up there and just spit a bunch of BS and people buying into that and me buying into it and thinking, that guy just flat lied to me. I'd just rather tell people the truth and. We've heard some things, certainly, but I don't think anything's imminent, at least initially, very soon. But I do think Marcus Freeman will be in the race. I think Fickell will be somebody that will be they will be interested in, and Matt Campbell. Other than that, I'm just not sure who else is going to be. It's crazy. It's crazy because. As we mentioned, this really could turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to Notre Dame. Or it may not, But with everything like this, there's a new opportunity. And I think that opportunity is I don't think Notre Dame was ever going to get over that hump with Brian Kelly because of the things that I've mentioned. And now you have an opportunity where somebody could absolutely take over and take the ball and run with it. And I just think, as I mentioned in my commentary today, it's so important. You got to get somebody who loves recruiting because that's going to be the thing that's going to take you over the top. Right now, you have enough talent to win if you can coach, but if you want to get over the top, you still need to get a little bit better talent than what they have. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Yeah, I agree overall. I did think that if they just continue to put themselves in position, at some point, there's a chance that things can break your way. And this year could have been the year. Notre Dame didn't have the best team they've ever had, but you look at this year in terms of there's no real dominant team that's like, whoa, we can never, why are we even in the playoff? Georgia, yeah, they're the best team, but they could lose. I mean, they haven't looked lights out every single game they've played. So I think, you could get lucky. I always thought Notre Dame could win one just by virtue of being there enough times and getting lucky. But I never thought they were going to be the number one team wire to wire, enter the playoff as the favorite, and just take care of business under Brian Kelly. I didn't see that happening. So they could have got lucky, but it was going to take luck.
Yeah, I think so. And, as I kind of mentioned, so much of it is the recruiting part of things. And on top of that, it's identifying a elite quarterback. It's just something Kelly has never done. And no disrespect to Ian Book, who I think, was a good college quarterback, but just isn't elite. And we've seen, Chris, how many times have we seen just an elite quarterback can take you so far? It just really can. And, there's hundreds of it. But maybe not hundreds, but a guy like Trevor Lawrence, a guy like Deshaun Watson before him, and Vince Young and
Joe Burrow's one year.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, gosh, all the way back to Michael Vick at Virginia Tech. There's all kinds of examples of it, and hopefully, if Notre Dame could find one of those guys, I think they'd be in great shape, and that's really something that I think they need to get. Another question: do you think they will use the bowl game as an audition for Freeman to see if he's fit to be the next coach? No, I don't think so. I think they'll just either name him or not. That's what I would guess.
Do you think if Marcus Freeman's on the staff for whatever the postseason game, he's on the staff as the head coach? Probably.
Yeah,
right?
I would think so. Yeah. I think if he's going to coach the bowl game, it would be because he's the head coach at Notre Dame. Yeah, I would think so.
So he'll already have earned the job before the need to do anything.
Yeah, and I think if what's going to be interesting is, will he want to coach if he's hired as the defensive coordinator at LSU.
Oh.
Would he want to finish that? I don't know. Would
So we're
Tommy
talking about a
Rees?
playoff?
Yeah, I mean in
I
the
don't think
playoff, or no, just like a New Year's Six bowl. Would Tommy Rees want to
if you're
finish
Notre
that?
Dame, would you even want to? If you're Notre Dame, would you even let
But
him?
who would
I'm not
coach
sure.
then? I mean, who would coach
just
the
do
game?
like Oklahoma and Wisconsin do. Just bring back Lou and have Lou in there and just be interim head coach.
Yeah.
I don't know who. I guess we got all these GAs in the office.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they could. I don't. And why would you do that? Because you got to spend time. Those guys, if anyone that's coaching, if you think the head coach is going, the assistants have to go because they have to recruit. They can't spend time preparing Notre Dame playing the Fiesta Bowl over recruiting for the future. Kelly wouldn't allow them.
Yeah. It would be. I don't know. I don't know how that will unfold. I really don't. All right, I keep looking for more questions, folks. If you have some questions, feel free to type them in the chat there, and Chris and I will get to them. Interesting question here. Can Notre Dame hire Fickell, announce his staff, but still let him coach the playoff game? Billy Napier is coaching Louisiana Lafayette this weekend. I think it depends on how many of his staff would come to Cincinnati. Or come from Cincinnati. If Swarbrick could get, I guess, a commitment out of, most of the staff, because really for like Charlie Weiss, when it came down to him coaching in the pro game and all that type of stuff, I really think that hurt him because he wasn't able to kind of interview the coaches and things like that. Plus, he was trying to finish recruiting and all that type of stuff. But the one thing about it is early signing day is happening now compared to when Charlie was there. So you could lock up a lot of the guys if you're Fickell or if you're Freeman or somebody. You could lock them up now before signing day, and then it wouldn't be as big of a thing, and then you could kind of finish out your staff that way. With Charlie, he couldn't do that because there was no early signing period, and he needed to be on the road selling Notre Dame. And I think that really hurt Charlie. But I think that it could be done more if you feel like you can get all the guys to commit on, the 15th. But if it's Luke Fickell and he has no relationship with any of these guys, it's going to be a tall order to get him to try and, cement some of these guys as commitments. I don't think it would be something that, even though he's a really good coach and a popular name, I don't think he's somebody that somebody's just going to go like, oh, yeah, okay, well, it's Fickell. I'm just signing right away. They're going to want to know who their position coach is. They're going to want to talk to their position coach. They're going to want to know the plan that he has for him, all that type of stuff. So with Freeman, it would certainly be easier, I think.
On the other side of that, so you can do that if you're Swarbrick, but and if you Mike makes some good points, I don't necessarily it needs to be all the guys from Cincinnati, right? So if it's saying, hey, you're going to keep these guys, you're going to keep Lance Taylor, great. You're going to keep whoever you're keeping here. If we can just put together a staff, that would help to get signed. But I think the other side of that equation is Luke Fickell. Will Luke Fickell want that arrangement? And then that kind of tricky, goes down to the players. And I mentioned it earlier, but the more I think about it, if you're a player on Cincinnati and Luke Fickell comes in, you know what? People were laughing about his answer, but he didn't lie. He didn't lie about that in that answer. Where we've seen over the last couple of weeks, people have been deliberately misleading and lying. Mm-hmm. So he hasn't done that. And if I'm a player on Cincinnati, it's a legit, it's not hard to see why would you leave Cincinnati to go to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more hard to see why you would leave Notre Dame to go to LSU. Especially, I'm sure you've sold all these kids on Notre Dame being the premier place in the world, blah, blah, blah. So if I'm a player in Cincinnati and Coach Fickell says, hey, guys, I got this great opportunity, but I want to finish this off with, us, let's go do this thing. I could see myself playing for that guy. Yeah. So if his players allow it and he can check those boxes, I could see him being hired, announced, and still coach Cincinnati in the playoff. And to be honest, I think it'd be pretty cool for Notre Dame fans to watch.
All right. Jack Thompson says Freeman doesn't make any sense, but for his recruiting prowess. He hasn't got any head coaching experience. He needs to prove himself elsewhere as a head coach first. Notre Dame will always be there. Well, if Georgia felt that way, they wouldn't have Kirby Smart. If Clemson felt that way, they wouldn't have Dabo Swinney. You know, if Oklahoma felt that way, they wouldn't have Lincoln Riley. Oh, I guess they don't have Lincoln Riley anymore. But this list goes on and on. We've done this many times. There's a lot of guys who, hey, somebody's got to get a head coaching job somewhere. I mean, where's it going to start? And
Ryan Day's another one.
What's that?
Ryan Day's another one.
Oh, certainly, right? Absolutely. So, there's a lot of guys that make that move and are successful doing it. And I think that's why he'd even be under consideration at this point. I don't think he'd have much of a chance to get it if he weren't coaching at Notre Dame. I don't think that, say he were still at Cincinnati, I don't think he would have a prayer to get it. But since he's been at Notre Dame, I think that's why he has a chance, and we'll see. All right. All right, let me see here. Oh, boy. I see some guys advocating for Urban Meyer in here. I just don't see that as a possibility. Do you, Chris?
No, I don't.
I don't think
I would have loved it. 12 years or even more. Well, I guess 17 years ago, maybe. Man, sign me up for Urban Meyer. I think that, I wouldn't surprise to see what he did in Florida. That would have been great, aside from the arrests to have at Notre Dame. But this has followed him too much. You're talking about from Florida to Ohio State, and however you feel about the stuff down in Jacksonville now. I mean, and one thing that always gets left out when talking about Urban Meyer these days is health. I mean, what happened to his health concerns? I thought he was, done, couldn't coach anymore because health. That stuff, if it's legit, then that could pop up back up at any time.
Yeah, do you think that was legit?
I don't know, man. The guy had a heart attack when he lost the game, and then the next year, and then he retired and unretired, and then the next year he retired. I mean, I don't think
you don't buy that
enough.
Heart attack thing, do you?
Yeah, at least there's something. His family seemed to be pretty damn worried about him. I think there was something there. Maybe it wasn't enough to get him to retire, but what, you think the whole thing was BS?
Are you talking more the thing at Ohio State? You mean?
The thing at Ohio started at Florida, then it moved to Ohio State. It seemed like
I mean, he didn't. The leaving of Florida had nothing to do with health.
No, I'm talking about the year before, right? Remember the year they had won all these games, then he lost one SEC championship game, and he woke up in the middle of the night and basically had a heart attack, and then he was in the hospital and said he's going to retire, and then he decided to come back.
You don't buy that, do you?
Yeah, I think there was something there.
No.
Well, Mike goes way back with Urban, so I'll trust. I'll defer to his judgment on this one.
Yeah, do you remember the last thing we saw about Urban Meyer?
Down at the bar in Jacksonville, you're talking about?
Yeah. The last thing we saw about Urban Meyer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you think that those things go hand in hand there?
All right. Next question. All right. Let's see if we can find one here. Hang on. There's so many. The problem is there's so many comments. It's hard to find out what is a question. So if here you go. Michael's got the idea. Put question in front of your question so we know it's a question. All right, Michael. Mike, you are the AD. Who are you hiring and why? Me personally, I would probably go after Luke Fickell first. And the reason I would go after Luke Fickell is I think he understands how you have to win in the Midwest. And that is discipline, that is mental and physical toughness, that is playing great defense, and that is running the football. And those are things you absolutely must do well in the Midwest if you're going to have a chance to play in the playoff and things like that. I've said it many times. Notre Dame's not going to out-athlete, Clemson. They're not going to out-athlete Alabama. It's just not going to happen. So the only way Notre Dame is going to beat them is the way Michigan beat Ohio State, and that's punch them in the mouth. And I think Luke Fickell believes that 100%. And the reason I think that is because we see it on the field. They're a disciplined team. They play very, very tough. And they run the football. They want to run the football. And their defense is really, really good. That guy understands defense. If a defensive coordinator leaves, he's a guy who can just take over immediately. And so I like that idea. I would look at him first because I think he's the safe choice. But what I wouldn't do is I would not wait. I would make him tell me now, I'm your guy. I will take the job. And if he says he doesn't want to or he wants to coach the Cincinnati games, I'd probably have a problem with that. If there was a way to work it out, I'd try and accommodate him if I could figure out a way to make it work. But if I couldn't, I would move on. And then if I couldn't get Fickell, I'd probably go right to Marcus Freeman. And I'm a gambler by nature. I don't actually gamble, but it just, I would take the chance because I've seen so many good things happen when you take chances. And with my own personal staff, I've seen it many, many times. None of these guys had the resume to be hired, right? I mean, none of them. Chris, you probably had the best resume out of all of them. And it was a solid resume and everything, but I got plenty that had much more experience than what you had. Mm-hmm. But what I knew is I had to find the right guy who had a passion for this and really wanted to be involved in this. And you can get a lot of good writers. They're out there, but that doesn't mean they're going to be good at this job. And that's, you have to find the right person. I think that Freeman has the right mentality. I think he has the right presentation. I think his work ethic is second to none. I think that he will go recruit a lot of players that can really help Notre Dame. And I think the fact that if Notre Dame could hire an African-American coach and have it be a success, that would be a huge boon for Notre Dame as far as recruiting goes, changing, perceptions about Notre Dame and that type of thing. He'd be the perfect hire if he had 2 years coaching experience somewhere else. It wouldn't even be a question. It really wouldn't. But he doesn't have that, so we can't go off that. So it is a gamble. But he would be certainly 1B or 1A, 1 and 1A for me. And I wouldn't wait around for Fickell if I didn't, if he couldn't give me what I needed. And I just think it's important. I don't think people realize how many recruits they're going to lose, but not just recruits. They could lose a lot of players too. I mean, we know for a fact, Chris, there were a lot of guys who were going to come back. They felt like they had a chance for a national championship. And I want Jared Patterson back. I want Kyron Williams back. I want Isaiah Foskey back. None of those guys are coming back if Freeman isn't the guy. Very few. They just are. And I think a lot of people felt, well, Kelly's going to have a really good chance of, convincing Jimmy Clausen. I'm like, not a prayer. No way. And, yeah, he will. No, he didn't.
I wonder. I'm not even sure they even met.
I don't think so. Yeah, he was out the door as fast as he could get there. So those are the reasons. It's a good question. I gave you my best answer. What about you, Chris? What would you do?
I'm of the same thought process, but I like to bring something another way. You talked about being a gambler. Is this an opportunity if you're Swarbrick or somebody to really actually gamble and say and look down the road and say, if I go with Freeman, it's a gamble, but what would I do next, right? You'd have to almost think through that step. Okay, if I'm ready to go with Freeman, who am I going to if this does not work out? And if you have someone there, or you probably need a few guys, right? Because it would be way riskier, guys that are younger in their career, or maybe it's a Clark Lee. You say maybe this guy can get it turned around, or maybe it's a younger guy or somebody that with the timing's not quite right now. I wonder if this is you can actually talk yourself into making a gamble, even if you think scale of 1 to 100. I'm 95%. I like Luke Fickell, but I'm 92% or 90% Freeman. But Freeman's got the higher upside, right? I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
So if you said one of these coaches is definitely going to win a national championship in their career, I think you probably say Freeman. But I also, like, one of these coaches could flame out and be a disaster. I think you probably say Freeman. So, if you have a good, handle on what you would do in that instance, I think you could, talk yourself into making a gamble on Freeman. But to me, the list is two guys, and I would personally be happy with either one of them.
I would too.
And I think there's really no way you shouldn't get them unless you're sold on Matt Campbell or something. I mean, Marcus Freeman's lobbying for the job now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want Marcus Freeman, you can get Marcus Freeman.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine Luke Fickell turning Notre Dame down.
No, he wouldn't.
Exactly.
He wouldn't.
So these are the top two guys. You got to get one of them, and I don't know. I still think maybe there's a chance you get both of them.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Yeah, it certainly could be. When I think about the situation with Fickell, I think it's a good hire because I think he can take what Kelly did and improve on it and get better. Is he going to be the Pied Piper that Marcus Freeman will be? Probably not. I don't think he's going to recruit at the level that he's going to be that Freeman can. But sometimes look, you just build something and keep building on it. You don't need the greatest personality. I mean, Nick Saban is not like a funny guy, or he's not charismatic. He really isn't any of those things. He's successful because he has the history to back it up and say, look, I've done this, and this is why you should come here. And he's earned that. But when you think of his personality, he's not Urban Meyer. He's not, some of these other coaches that are out there. He just doesn't have that kind of personality. But certainly a good coach. And, so Fickell could be that guy. He really could be, because I think Kelly has got it to a place where somebody who's a good coach can come in here, continue on that, and keep building on it. And even just a bump of a new face. Because to be honest with you, I think Notre Dame, what has hurt Notre Dame recruiting just as much as anything is the fact that every time Notre Dame gets in one of these bowl games or playoff games, they get blown out. And they think it's a Brian Kelly problem and a Notre Dame problem. They think that that's the reason that this is happening. You remove Brian Kelly, and there's now the opportunity to be something better. You know what I mean? And just having a new face, a new anything, gives you an opportunity that's going to open doors that if Brian Kelly were still here, those doors wouldn't be open. And, we saw that just with recruiting, the difference between Clark Lee and Marcus Freeman. There are doors that Marcus Freeman kicked open that Clark Lee would have never even had a chance to approach the door. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big thing to consider as well. All right, I'm looking for some more questions here. Let's see if we have some. Here we go. Question, I live in New Orleans. I've been telling all my LSU friends, get used to him hearing them say this. Winning is hard. Yeah, that wasn't much of a question, but yeah, I think that was more of a statement. But yeah, I agree. He's going to hear that a lot. Question, what do you think would be the top two reasons why Swarbrick wouldn't go with Marcus Freeman? Well, I think, first of all, lack of experience. That's a big thing. You can't discount how important that is in a lot of positions. It's not the only thing, but it is certainly important. I don't think that if Marcus Freeman was coaching this group of players this year, he could have got Notre Dame to 11-1. I think that Brian Kelly got them to Notre Dame to 11-1 because of all of his experience, how to handle these things. And so I think that that's a big part of it. And then the other thing is he just may not like what he hears when it comes to how he wants to build the program, what he wants to do with the offense, who he wants to hire, what's important to him, all that kind of stuff. It will be certainly factored in, and I think those would probably be a couple of the things that would keep him from getting the job if he interviewed. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to the first point, right? Like he's never been a head coach. That's the only real, reservation you have about the guy. And he's been at Notre Dame, which is a plus, but even that, he's only been there for 1 year. But you can tell how beloved he is by the players and everything. So that's very encouraging. So aside from that lack of head coaching experience, I'm not sure what else you'd use against them.
Yeah. All right. Good question here. How many current coaches do you feel were on the staff for Brian Kelly versus for Notre Dame versus a feather in their coaching resume cap? I mean, I don't think any coach is there for Brian Kelly. You know what I mean? I don't think that any coach is there because I want to coach for Brian Kelly. I do think, and I've heard many times Kelly's a good guy to work for, other than game day. Other than, game day, he can be a little bit salty when things aren't going well. But I think that's every head coach. So I do think that coaches enjoyed coaching for him because I think he let coaches coach. He didn't interfere in a lot of things, and he let guys do their job. So I think that there are probably a lot of guys who didn't mind coaching for Kelly, but I don't think that they were there because it was Coach Kelly. Where, if it's like Saban, I think there's a lot of guys there because it's Nick Saban. Not just that, you want to coach for Nick Saban, but you want to learn. You want to get in that environment. You want to figure out, how does he make this work? So if I get my opportunity, I have a chance to do something very similar. And so I think that's why a lot of guys coach for Saban and put up with his stuff, is because they want to learn and they want to learn from the best. Do I think some guys really love Notre Dame? Yeah. I think some coaches, I can't tell you how many coaches, and Chris, you can probably, I know you can confirm this. There have been so many coaches that have told me the reason they really like coaching Notre Dame is because you just get a totally different type of kid than you do anywhere else. And that's what they love more than anything, is just the quality of player that you get to interact with and person that you get to interact with, and the people surrounding them, meaning family and friends and things like that. That's a big part of it. Anything you want to add?
No, I agree. I mean, to your point about, obviously there's some coaches there that are looking to be at Notre Dame to do a lot of the same things you said at Saban, but I don't think that is specific to Brian Kelly, right? So whoever the coach is at Notre Dame, these young guys are going to want to be there. I also think there's obviously some guys that have relationships with Brian Kelly that go way back. So if you were saying, like, are they there from Kelly because they've coached with him for 15 years? Yeah, I guess so. But, I think you're right in terms of, like, they're not there just to worship at the altar of Brian Kelly. They're there. It's a damn good gig to be coaching at Notre Dame, and that's why they're there. And, Kelly happens to be the head guy that gave him the opportunity. So he's also, a guy you can learn from, obviously, but not like Saban, like you mentioned.
I just got the funniest text. I got to read this. One of my buddies, if anybody who is, remembers the post-game show we used to do, my buddy Jimma just sent this text to me. And it's pretty dang funny. He said, "How funny would it be if they make the playoffs and Freeman is the coach and he wins the national championship?"
Hey, that happened to you.
It really could happen. I didn't even think of that.
I doubt it, because I know how big of a Michigan fan Mike is, and that's exactly what happened with Michigan basketball back in '89. So you remember that?
Shut up, Michigan man. Christian, the Michigan man.
But yeah, it would be something, wouldn't it? And,
yeah.
Someone in the chat earlier said, "What if Luke Fickell coaches, hires by Notre Dame and coaches Notre Dame?" I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be something. He coaches against Cincinnati, in the playoffs for Notre Dame. That would be
crazy. Yeah. That would.
You imagine the lead up to that?
Yeah, no doubt. All right, still looking for some questions here. We're gonna probably. I'll take a few more, and then I gotta get off because I gotta do Mike's podcast for the LSU guy that I'm good friends with. He wants me to get on there and talk. So, but we'll be back on later today. First, we'll take a couple more questions. Here we go. Do you have any info about Kelly? Why Kelly's meeting lasted 11 minutes at 7 a.m. And did the players not show, or did players not show? I don't know. That's probably a better question for Matt. He was there.
Certainly,
I mean, you're not
players,
going to
the players
stand
all
there
spoke.
for 30 minutes. You're going to go in there. You're going to say your thing. You know that your team is going to be upset with you no matter what you say. So you want to go in there and say whatever you got to say and then get out of there. So the length of the meeting, I don't think really surprised me by any means. I'm actually kind of surprised that Kelly even did it. You know what I mean? Some coaches do talk to players after that. Some coaches just leave in the middle of the night. So I don't know. I'm not really that surprised though. And anything you want to add, Chris?
No, I from what I've seen, it seems like the players were all there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how long Kelly's not going to go out there and give a huge soliloquy? He's not going. He's not that. He's not going to sit there and wander down memory lane and get tearful with these guys. And be in there. He's going to be very businesslike. I would imagine a few players probably had something to say, but what are you going to say? And I'm sure that there wasn't long answers to the questions or whatever they had. So, I know a lot of people were wondering why they had to get up at 7 a.m. to do it. I was on the phone with a parent when you sent that tweet of the group message that Kelly sent out that got leaked. And that was the first thing he said. Damn, they got to get there at 7 a.m. He said, shows you the power these coaches have. I told my buddies, imagine a girl making you wake up at 7 a.m. to dump you after you already know she dumped you.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Exactly. So yeah, I probably would have been flying a couple one-finger salutes. I really would have if I would have been there. Look, I mean, I'm sorry, you cannot sit there and tell people that it's the greatest place on earth, and then you leave. I don't know. Happens all the time, though. Definitely does. Here's a good question: does LSU have to pay ND any buyout money?
They have to.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know how much, but let's hope that goes to assistant coaches. Let's hope.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take one more question. I'll find it, and then I got to jump off here because I got to do Mike's thing. I told him I would do it. So, this one here. How long did it take for ND to announce Kelly when he was hired? I think it was certainly before they played their game. It was really only a couple of weeks. Or was it? It may not even been a couple of weeks.
I doubt it was even that long. I'm trying to think. We were just talking about Jimmy. I feel like Kelly had already been announced when Jimmy was going pro, or maybe not. Maybe not. But yeah,
I think he was because I think he was because I think it. If
People
I remember right, they fired Weiss, and then because I remember that weekend. If you remember, Chris, we had to do that. Charlie, you weren't there, but we had to do the infamous Charlie, fireside chat.
Fireside chat that wasn't supposed to get out.
Yeah, and a couple things leaked from that was not supposed to get out. So, but I think it happened like later that either that Thursday or Friday of the next week is when we found that. If I remember right.
Someone in the chat saying that Weiss was fired on November 30th. Kelly news leaked on December 11th and announced on December 12th, which makes sense because remember Kelly was at that. I feel like it leaked when he was at the coaches award or something like that, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yep. So Weiss was fired pretty much the day after the last game of the season.
Yeah. All right. We got one more question. Mike, in your frank commentary, you point out the importance of the next coach wanting the Notre Dame job specifically. To what extent do you think that applies to Marcus Freeman? Oh, I think Marcus Freeman would walk through glass to get this job. I think there's two dream jobs for him, and it's the same two dream jobs for Luke Fickell, and that is Ohio State and Notre Dame. I think both those guys, those are the two jobs they want more than anything, and both of them are up for one of them right now. So it'll be interesting to see who ends up getting the job in the end, and it may not be either of those guys, but I find it kind of ironic that's the situation. So, all right, folks.
And that they're so close. They're so close,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I know. And it's just crazy to think, man. It really is.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that's going to be it for the live one. For now, we'll be on a little later today. I'll announce a time on the site and everything, and let you know. If we get more updates or anything, we'll kind of come back and talk about it. But just wanted to kind of answer your questions. So hopefully you enjoyed that. We'll be back a little bit later today with some more YouTube Live. Thanks for listening and watching.